Welcome to the God is Not an Asshole podcast. If you are one of the many people done with religious dogmatism, hang on. You might sense transcendence, but your church or other faith community never seem to get off the ground. You realize that honoring your conscience means more than fitting in and keeping hard-to-explain rules? Hang on. You could probably think of the goodness in your tradition, and you tried your best to save that baby, but there's so much bathwater. Join your hosts, David Norman Moore Jr. in California and Kerry Connolly in New Jersey, who are collaborating to bring on guests who have found life on the other side of fundamentalism. Guests with stories of how they have liberated themselves from beliefs that divide us from each other. None of our guests' narratives are identical, but we hope you'll find something in common with each of them. We invite you to experience our common bond as we all inspire even more of us to embrace the true self.
We are here, Kerry and I, with Mickie Morelli, a longtime friend. How old would you say you were when we met?
I want to say eight or nine.
Wow. Which means I was probably around 28 or 9.
Really?
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I was about 8 or 9, and I just turned 50 in June.
Well, okay.
Wow.
So then I was even younger because I'm 68. So I was probably 27 or something. Whoa. And you were a student and I was a teacher, and it was a Christian school and a lifestyle where we met some beautiful people, but we're all recovering, or just experiencing, more complete life, post, whatever that was. And we still have a few friends, from that period. But anyway, I know your parents. I knew them then. And your name, Morelli, is, it says a lot. I mean, you have Italian in you, and you are Latina as well, right?
Yeah, and actually I'm British too, because my mom's mom was from Devonshire.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay.
My mom's mixed. So.
No, I didn't even know that. Wow.
And actually, I don't know if you know that, my dad adopted me. He's not my birth father.
Oh. Well, all of this is news to me. Wow.
Well, people ask me, and I've been asked this before. I think I was 4 when he came in my life, around 3 or 4. And I don't really have a lot of memories before him. So to me, him and my mom are equal.
Okay.
I don't have a distinction between them because I can't remember before him.
Yes.
Because, you're so little.
Yeah. The beauty of loving parents. And yet even loving parents cannot always protect one from life's traumas.
And also, I always say this to my friends. They're only like 16 and 17 years older than me.
Wow. I kind of remember them being younger than me. Yes. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let me just reflect with you. I don't know everything that you had to deal with, but there are some specific events in our history that I do remember. But I rather than starting with some of the things that I passed through with you, maybe you could just kind of share with us a bit of your story.
I just wanted to say that it's a little bit funny. I have never listened to a podcast until I listened to yours.
Aw. Well,
Isn't that hilarious? I mean,
Hmm.
I'm just always so bad at technology and always the last at things. I was the last person probably to have a BlackBerry before I went to iPhone. And I'm just always kind of been like that. And I'm kind of outing myself because people have sent me tons of podcasts and I always heart them, but I never listen to them. Just heart it. Like, how lovely. And then I never really get back to it or never. But then when you sent me yours, that was the first podcast. And you have I'm sorry. I know you said your name and can you repeat?
Kerry. Yes.
You have such a lovely, soothing voice. When I did listen to your guys' podcast, I laid in bed and I just laid in the dark and I listened to the podcast. But I just think it's kind of funny. It's a little humorous.
Thank you. That is being a guest.
And then it was just funny because I'm like, what is the etiquette? Am I allowed to take a sip of water? What if I have to sneeze?
Just do you. You're all
just
good.
Over my usual overthinking of everything.
We're very casual here, so please feel comfortable to do whatever you need to do. It's all good. And
speaking of soothing voices, when you were young, I remember telling you that you reminded me of I have 4 sisters, and one of them just has this gentle, soothing voice, and she's tender-hearted. And I just said, you remind me of my sister. But anyway, go ahead and you tell us about Mickie.
Well, I remember that exact moment when you told me that. I remember being downstairs. I call it the underground school. I don't think that was its proper name. I can't remember the name. My parents probably do because they wrote the check, but I don't remember the proper name. I was just little. And I remember you were, I think, had to speak with me. And we were in one of the little children's church rooms. I remember the exact room. When you go you go down the hallway and then there's the stairs and then you go and it was on the right. It was the bigger one for the I think it was the smaller classroom. And I remember us sitting in there and I remember I was crying, like hyperventilating, crying, nothing from anything you did. But I remember you telling me, you're so sensitive. You remind me of your sister. And I remember that for years. And I remember that kindness from you. And you had so much empathy and you were such a safe person. In that time, it was intense. Like if you didn't live it, the born again Christian, they came out. It was the tracks. It was the intense ministry. It was some hardcore at times. It was like, you're going to do this, you're going to burn in hell. And when you're like a little kid and you're 8 and you're 9 and you're told that you are so sinful and you're, disruptive. And all I knew is that I was a little girl and I loved to listen to albums and I loved Amy Grant and I loved Keith Green and Reba Rambo and I loved Hello Kitty and I had sticker books. And
I remember.
And my best friend Shannon. And it was just so intense. Like my eyes welled up and I felt a little sad at that time because we just passed notes and everything we did. It just felt very like authority kind of thing. And I always felt like I was in trouble. I was always bad. And you always were the opposite of that message to me, because when you had to speak to me for, I don't know, whatever, maybe, I don't know what they had to. You were so kind and so gentle and you always came in love. And that was so powerful for me. I think I wrote you a letter years ago and I don't know if I got it out right. And then I also have I didn't find out till almost college that I had dyslexia. So sometimes I leave out words or say things funny or silly and wrong, but I just hope that I gave you that message that how much you impacted me and how kind you were. And there were some not good men in my life and, when I was a child and you were a good one and you made me feel like not all men.
Wow.
And, I've had a lot of loss since 2016. I had 3 cousins I grew up with. I had a grandparent, the father of my child, died of cancer.
Yes.
I had
I remember
one of my best friends die of cancer, all from 2016 on. And then 2020 hit. And my son's father died in 2019 in October. And I had this thing, and I said, and I was in aesthetics. I was an esthetician for over 20 something years. And all of a sudden, I remember driving down the hill from Serenity House. And I thought to myself, I can't ever do this one more day. I can't
Okay,
be
let me just tell everybody that Serenity House is a hospice place here in Santa Barbara. Okay, go ahead, Mickie.
Oh, yeah. And it's the most beautiful, lovely place.
Yes.
And they do amazing work. And I always say if I won the lottery, they would be getting a huge chunk of that money. Yeah. You know, to them, it's amazing. They don't turn people away, and it's just beautiful. And actually had my son's father and a cousin I grew up who passed within months of each other there. And I was driving down the hill. It was Tega Hill. And I just had this feeling, and I had done aesthetics for over 20 something years, and I always loved it. Always had fun. It was amazing. I always thought, I have no stress in my job. I do, you know, it's fun. And I was driving down the hill, and I thought, I can't do this one more day. I want to do something different. So that January, the lease was up at my place. I had a girl take over my thing, but I was done, and I haven't gone back. And then 2020 hit. Nobody was working. And I had to sit with 2020, and I had to sit in my grief. And it's interesting how grief brings up other griefs. And then I thought about what had transpired in my life and as a little girl, and how I never grieved any of that. I was indifferent, and I was hiding, and I was never still enough to feel it. So when 2020 hit, I was full of grief, and I was full of grief of things that happened. And I had only begun to feel. I had gone through a lot of counseling, but I had only begun to feel. So the last few years have just been hard, but amazing at the same time. And I mean, if you want a director, ask me a question, because
what's it like when you start feeling emotions that you haven't felt all that time, right? I'm so resonating with everything that you're saying. I've had a very similar experience over the past few years, and including this morning. So I just wondering, I'm curious to know what your experience is like, because I think that even work that I do with my clients, we all say, oh yeah, I dealt with that a long time ago. And yet here it is again, showing up, until you actually feel it. So what is that like for you to actually feel?
I think that I go through these, I think the best way to describe it for me, myself, and I know not everyone feels this way. And I know that some people can get triggered, and I said, oh, I felt this way. And they may have had same pain, and they get upset. Well, I don't, and I'm just speaking for myself. Mm-hmm. That I go through these cycles where I become extremely angry, and I get upset, and I think of a certain person. And it's interesting how memories are, a smell, a scent, a song that someone wrote that's related to this person that brings me to these different little branches back to a memory. And then I will get angry, and then I would say, you can't be angry. And then I'll think of the person that I'm angry at, and I'll tell myself, I just want to send them so much love and light, because I can't have this cord between us. And I need to release that. But I'm going to tell you, I'm not perfect, and I get mad, and I get angry, and then I go in these cycles, and I go, now I got to release it. And I had a friend of mine, I know she won't mind that I call her friend. Her name was Caroline. And she taught me all these breathing exercises in 2017 to deep belly breathe, which learning to breathe properly is amazing. And it's so, beneficial, for your health and for your mind. And I've just been, if I can just say it, just breathing through these feelings and these steps. And I think it just goes in cycles for me. And then I'll laugh, and I'll have I feel like, honestly, it gave me, I think, a really good sense of humor. I have a lot of dark humor. Mm-hmm. So, I think I deal with things with being, humor a lot. And I'll laugh, and then I'll be mad. And then I'll feel a little shame for being mad and angry, thinking I shouldn't, but I'm having anger is a natural thing. and it's okay. And I'm going to release myself from having that anger. And I'm just going to let it go.
I heard a really interesting, it was a saying, or maybe it was a meme that I saw on Instagram or something, but it said that anger is the part of us that knew we deserved better. And I loved that. It's given me a lot of healing in myself, because I tend to shame myself for anger, for having anger, and try to move right to, oh, I'm going to send them love and light, when really I want to punch something, and, I think it's important to allow us the space to have and process and metabolize the anger, because it's a valid part of us.
I think you're absolutely correct. So I just think that I'm caught in this cycle of being angry, then I'll get sad, and then I might weep and release, and then, let it go. It's just this ongoing cycle. I think that's just where I am right now. And
that's
just
interesting that what Kerry said about the part of you that deserves better, because that's kind of the way my reflection of you is shaped, as, starting as, a little girl and then moving towards adolescence, is, oh, wow, this little girl deserves better. That's the way I thought of you even back then.
I look back and I just now I'm able to digest some of it and think I was just a little girl. I wasn't, all those things that were laid heavy on me, And, I was born in the 70s and the 90s and the born again Christian, and all of it, was intense. I mean, I went to church, and I went to Christian school and church and youth group and Wednesday night service and Saturdays and Christian camps and then Wednesday chapel at school. I mean, my whole life was church. And the message that I got, and unfortunately, from a lot of the people and stuff around me, not Pastor Moore when I say this, is that I was bad. I wasn't, I was just bad, and I wasn't, I wasn't worthy. And it's interesting to me because I feel this message a lot, like on social media, from some conservative people, and the way that I want to do for feeling so like not accepted for who, just as I was, I just have this heart to accept everyone as they are. Addicts, anybody that's going through a hard time, homeless people, anything. Yeah. I just want to love them. I just want them to know they're accepted with me. I want to look in their face and I want to smile. I want to be kind, because I know what it feels like.
See, now you're again, just all over again, reminded me of my sister Tootie, because that is her up and down. I mean, when there was this, not so much overt, but even in our own family and church life of heteronormativity, she was embracing LGBTQ people. She was welcome. Well, honestly, all my sisters are kind of like this. I mean, we had this guy who was an addict, and this other guy who was a friend who was seriously mentally ill and homeless, and the kind of person that other people would walk by and not make eye contact. And he would be knocking on our door, and my sisters would be welcoming him and finding him food. And so that kind of acceptance just reminds me so much of, especially of Tootie.
I really do. I mean, I've never publicly, I don't know if this is considered publicly, I don't know, spoke about this. I mean, in small circles, maybe some kids that I actually went to school with, which is just one person. I mean, I've never really talked about it. And
you mentioned Shannon earlier. Have you talked to Shannon at all?
We've texted a little bit.
Okay.
We haven't seen each other in honestly decades. Like we don't see each other. And it was just recent. And I think it was our mom's exchange in the last, and just here and there and make silly, I feel really bad, honestly, on her behalf too. I mean, she was just a kid and she was very inquisitive, and we felt like, we can ask questions. I remember being in Bible study and in our school thing, and they were talking about, asking God into your heart. And she goes, well, what if you're dying and at the last minute you ask God into your heart, you get to go to heaven, but you did all this? And they would be like, I think they thought it as her being defiant, but I think that we were curious because, like, yeah, I want to know. It was just, and it was just felt like you couldn't ask questions. I don't know. It was super intense. That school, when I think about it, was daunting and it was intense. There was, there was some great, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry to interrupt, but what was the process of realization and deconstruction? Like, how did that start for you when you first started to question what you'd been taught at that school and the experiences that you'd had at that school?
Well, I don't know if I don't even know how to say this. When I was under 10 years old, I was molested by a youth pastor, and it was in all of the papers in Santa Barbara. But of course, our names weren't put in the article because we were minors, and I would never say the other persons that were involved because that's their story to tell, not mine. Mm-hmm. And I remember the whole church turned on us, and I was pulled out of that school, and we moved to Carpinteria because we were everybody just felt like the church turned on us and were saying that we were sinning because we were having a church mate or taking them to court. But, the DA took the charges. Like, there was nothing you could do at that point when you do something like that to a child. And I remember being like, we had to change our phone number. I remember being called a liar at like just a little kid and a Jezebel. This person admitted guilt. They pleaded guilty. And I remember the pastor of that church wrote a letter on his behalf asking for no jail time whatsoever. I have a copy of that letter. And I just felt so betrayed. And all these people were angry and they were mad again. And everything that they said, Jesus, all this stuff was nothing. Their actions never matched their words. So that was a turning point for me, looking like these people and the anger and trying to persuade my parents walking into court and everybody, people from the church on the person that did this to us on our side and nobody really with us. And this is a man in his 30s and I'm 8 and 9 years old and it's my fault.
So, as a child, one thing that I know that has been instrumental in my own healing has been to remember not to judge myself from the adult perspective, not to judge the child aspect of myself from the adult perspective, because often we want to look at our 5, 9, 10-year-old self and be like, well, why didn't you do this? And then I have to go and look at a 9-year-old and say, well, what would I expect of this 9-year-old, right? Why do I expect more, a more adult response from myself, right? So I'm curious to know, there's a very real, valid response that you had as a 10-year-old or a 9-year-old to everything that happened. How does the adult you look back now and process all of this? And
I think for years, I compartmentalized it. And like I said, I think I just pushed it away until recently. And I look back and I get angry at some certain people, that were very involved in that. And, I've written them letters. I've never sent them, and usually like in my past, if I've written something and I get it all out, it's gone. It's out of me. But these seem to stay, these letters in me, and I still get angry. And I'm struggling. I struggle. Like, I think it's just always going to be a little bit of a cycle. I know that, I'm very, very protective of my parents had to get restraining orders for the harassment. I'm very protective of the people that I love, like maybe overprotective. And, I look back and I just, honestly, I just feel sad when I really think about who I was. Like I said, I just like stickers and I liked Amy Grant and I absolutely loved praise and worship. Music to me still to this day is so beautiful and so wonderful and it's so healing. It's one of my most favorite things is to sing. I mean, I would never stand up and sing in front of people, but to myself and music and different artists. And I really think like, so that's a positive thing to me. I feel like the church being the praise and worship and my love for music really was instilled there. So I try to look for the positives and I allow myself to feel sad for that little girl that I kind of feel in a way, because I don't want to be like victim, but you know, a lot of my being a little girl was taken and robbed. You know, I had to kind of grow up fast and things that adults wanted to do were put on me.
Yeah.
That's interesting. You mentioned, the therapeutic element in music and in worship. We recently interviewed the person you would know as Gene James.
Yeah.
He's Mac James. He went to his formal name.
That's his dad's name, right?
That's his dad's name. Yeah. So we interviewed him and I asked him if there was anything, what he remembered of me in that era, in that period. And he said, well, one of the things he said was, playing the piano and just, leading everybody in that and singing. And, so like yourself, he was going through daily trauma during that period. And I don't know if you remember my kids, Charity and David. They were younger than you.
I do. I remember your daughter's hair. It was so amazing. Every day there were these styles and they were like, I don't know. I just remember the way you did her hair.
Yeah. Well, their mom did that, but, and I'm guessing like she was probably 5 years old.
She was little. She was tiny, so cute. Yeah. Yes. I remember. Okay. And she kind of like hopped when she walked, like, right?
Yes.
Like there's something like when she was little. I don't know if she does that now, but I remember
she's still very vibrant.
Like that.
As a 40-something. But anyway, our kids were in the school and, I took them out and put them in public school. And, to this day, Charity will say, we watched our kids just transform into more alive people being out of that environment. And they still dealt with, the anti-blackness that is, so prevalent. And yet, it was different. And until I talked to Gene, Mac, and of course you now, it never really hit home that there were other kids there still dealing with that. You know what I mean? I was just really so happy about my kids not being in that environment that I just really didn't think about it a whole lot because I felt like we had escaped. You know what I mean? Does that make sense to you at all?
Yeah. Yeah, it does. And then, I do have a memory of, it felt like the women, there's moms there that got their teacher, they were our teachers and, Maxine,
yes.
And she had such a mom vibe. And I remember her speaking up and trying to be heard, but I don't know. And I remember her being read on things, but her always trying to protect. And I mean, like when I'm talking about this, like, I don't want to just sit there and say there was like no one, there was you, there was, Maxine Dow that I really felt like, she had her best interests, and she was kind and protective, like a mom. She was like a mom on campus.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know if I ever shared this with you, but there was a principal there at the time. And I remember he took me up into his room and he said, and it stood for me for years. And he said, Mickie, one day, because you're so rebellious, you're going to knock on my door and you're going to ask to scrub my toilets for change. And that voice inside my head for years would repeat that because I was so rebellious. And it was, that's just short of abuse.
Were you rebellious? Were you rebellious, or were you passionate? And were you vibrant? And were you beautiful and curious and intelligent? I have no patience. I'm sorry, I just got triggered, but I have no patience for especially men telling women and girls that we are rebelling against who exactly? When we lean into the fullness of our capacity, it made me think of, you made me think of a conversation I was having with a white man who I was trying to explain about what it's like to be a woman and, also about anti-racism, my anti-racism work. And he told me that I was triggered. No, you don't get to explain my emotional experience to me. Thanks so much. And I said to him, I'm not triggered. I'm passionate and educated. And there's a really big difference. You know what I mean? And so I just, I have that. I really have obviously a very strong response to the idea of any man saying, and what you said, what that man said to you was horribly abusive.
Yes.
Yeah. And he said that. And then I remember he would bring you up into his office and then just let you sit there for an hour to 2 hours. And you would just be there like, what did I do? And you're just in his office sitting in there. And it was like some kind of mind ninja thing or something. Cause you'd be like,
not to mention you're not getting an education during those 2 hours.
Yeah. Well, that was debatable at that school. I
know.
I mean, at the packets, there wasn't any kind of, it wasn't a school where they got on the board and like gave you showed you examples of things. They were just packets you did in a little cubicle for 8 hours a day. You just sat in this cubicle. But Wednesdays you got to have partial day, but it was chapel, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was, and then it was like, a lot of misogyny. The boys would just, the boys are boys and they're excitable. And I'm sorry he bounced a ball in your face, but what were you doing before that made him do that? It was lot of stuff like that.
I remember when one of the boys called you the N-word.
Yeah.
Yep. Whoa. It's like, whoa, they didn't, where did that come from?
It was, I mean, I remember, and then, cause your children, are a person of color. I'm a person of color. Is that PC to say? I don't know how you wanted me to refer.
No, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
You get to refer to yourself however you wish to refer to yourself.
I'm a person of color. I feel. And, I mean, how many was there? I mean, if we did a percentage, is it 0.1 that was there? I mean,
maybe my 2 kids and you,
and me. Yeah.
Wow.
And it was interesting when the boys would get mad, stuff like that would come out of their mouth, really misogynistic stuff. And then, the principal, well, he just has a lot of, this, but we were always at fault. We were making them do it. We were doing this and it was just,
Did you know you were so powerful that you were able to just make all these people behave so horribly?
It was
incredible.
Great. Yeah, I know.
I mean, wow. That's some power.
Exactly. It was just such an interesting time. I mean, when I look back and I don't know, but I mean, then I think back, has things really changed? There's a lot of people radicalized now. I mean, I don't know if it's just in a different font. I don't know. Or I'm looking at it different because I'm an adult. But I mean, it's still a lot of hate from people that say they love the Lord.
Right. Yes.
Thank you so much for being here today. We are people who have left behind performance-based religion and the shame that comes with it. Maybe you have a personal liberation story to tell, and we want to know about it. Please contact us on Twitter at God is not an asshole, or text 805-703-8393, because the world needs to know that God is not an asshole.